It's good to be back after the break and to see everybody today and to be able to share with Dr. Avossa, to have him hear some of the wonderful things that are going on in our Rotary Club. I'm honored to introduce you to our new superintendent who's been in Fulton County Schools since June. He comes to us from Charlotte-Mecklenburg, which is one of the largest school systems in the county, in the country. They recently won the Broad Prize, which is, for those who are not familiar with that, is one of the most prestigious prizes you can win as a school system, and it is based on raising academic achievement. So Dr. Avossa served as the Chief Strategy and Accountability Officer in Charlotte-Mecklenburg and was a key part of the team that led that school system to winning that prize. He also, something that really attracted me to him is his experience at all three levels. He has been involved at elementary, middle, and high school, and I think that's real important to be able to have that perspective. So with no further ado, I'll introduce you to Dr. Robert Avossa, our school superintendent.
Just pretend this is a classroom. I know we haven't seen each other in a while, but let's keep the conversation a minimum. I appreciate it. Because he's got a lot of great things to say. He's doing a terrific job.
Great. Well, thank you all. The first thing I want to share is thank you for what you do as a club, as an organization. We cannot do this work alone. We've got principals here today who can tell you that their work today is more complicated than it was just 10 years ago, and even more complicated than just 20 years ago. And why? Why is that? When you look around our community, you realize that we're a very diverse community, not just ethnically, but also academically. Our children are coming to us with a variety of different issues, and we are required and charged to do everything we can to help our students succeed. So I want to start off first by saying thank you. We cannot do this work alone. I want to share a couple of thoughts about our school district. Many of folks who live here don't realize just how big and how complex our system actually is. We have nearly 100,000 students. We're about 95,000 students. We are one of the largest employers in Fulton County. We've got about 15,000 employees. Our budget is about $900 million a year. We operate one of the largest restaurant chains in Georgia, and we transport students every day across this county. We've got 1,000 buses. So you can imagine the complexity of a system our size and the number of requirements that we have, understanding that all of them go back to preparing kids for college and career. And I really applaud this Board of Education, this community, for their energy around that. And one of the reasons I was drawn to this position was because the district was considering what's called district charter status. And essentially what that is that the district was thinking about ways to continue to understand how public policy at the state level was impacting our ability to be flexible at the local level, and providing more flexibility to local governance councils and local teams around what's happening at their individual schools. My guess is if I asked Jerome Huff if he could have more flexibility at his school, at Roswell High School, would he like that? Or would he like to continue to see mandates and dictates from the state or central office on how to run his school? So I'm really excited about that opportunity. In fact, we submitted our application to the state in November and hope to hear back from them in March. We've got a visit set up with them in just a few weeks, so I'm looking forward to sharing some thoughts about that as well. As we enter into our second semester and my 8th month on the job, I wanted to share a couple of thoughts about what I've learned so far. Besides the fact that we've got a very large district, which is nearly 80 miles long, from one point to the other, is that everybody cares about public education, and they understand that there's a very strong link between our economic development and strong public schools. And we know that we've got lots of charters and private and parochial schools in the area that meet the needs of a variety of different kids. But if we don't have a strong public school system, we're not going to be able to be a viable option for businesses and organizations looking to find ways to build businesses here and bring jobs and economic prosperity to our community. And so we want to be part of that. And I feel like we're seeing some of that. Just to get a sense of how we're doing as a system, 6 of our high schools have the highest SAT scores in the entire state of Georgia. Right here, Roswell High School and Centennial High School were recently named as top high schools in the Atlanta magazine. You visit the schools, you see why. They do a great job trying to get kids connected to the school, feel engaged. You talked about Interact, you talked about clubs and activities. Kids today need more from us as teachers and leaders. When we were in school, people said, okay, you need to learn this formula, figure it out, and we did. What kids today ask us is, why do I need to learn that? How is that going to impact me? And the clubs and activities and organizations allow them to make what's going on in school real, and the activities real and meaningful to them in the real world. And we're competing today with 21st century gadgets, right? So today I'm talking to you, my notes are on an iPad. You're connected everywhere you go, and so it's really challenging. And one of the things that happened again during the first semester in my mind that was very positive was that the community supported our SPLOST effort, which is a $900 million investment in our future as public education. And about $250 million of that will be invested in technology infrastructure and devices like the one I just held up to be able to really move us to the 21st century. We talk about competing here in the Atlanta metro area, and that's important. In the Southeast, it's important. But we really know that we're competing with students across the world. And we've got to be able to prepare them not only to use technology, but to build technology and to be innovative. And we can't use 20th century modalities and expect them to learn differently. We cannot do that. And I applaud again and praise the support of the community to help with SPLOST. And we look forward to leveraging those dollars to improve outcomes for our kids across the district. Our ITBS scores just recently came in, and again, our 3rd and 5th graders shown outstanding increases in both reading and math. But what I would argue is that test scores are not the only thing we're worried about. We're worried about continuing that creativity. When you think about the global economy and you think about what America is good at, it's good at cooking up great ideas, right? So we create technology, we create the idea, the spirit of what it was that we want to solve, and then we have others sort of manufacture that, right? We've got lots of great things happening here. My thought, again, this is my opinion, why does America continue to be the hub of innovation around technology and medical? It's because of our public school system. It's because of the sports, the arts, the academics. My family, I'm from another country. I was born in Italy and moved here when I was in kindergarten. And when I think about the educational system that I was exposed to, my sisters who were much older than I, it was very black and white, very concrete. It was a lot of memorization, it was a lot of application. And so, yes, we could argue that the United States isn't performing as well in standardized tests. I would say that there's lots of things we're doing right, and we need to remember it's not just about standardized tests. It's an important part. We want our kids to do well on SAT, ACT, be competitive, but let's not underestimate the importance of athletics, sports, music, the arts. Those are the things that make America special, and I think we don't want to ever lose sight of that. And so, again, very, very proud of the energy that I see around that. I'm also excited to share with you a couple of major initiatives that I've put in place and that are on the way. We've had a very sort of, I don't want to say antiquated system around performance management, but we've never really held our staff members accountable the way we need to. And in November, I rolled out a new central office evaluation system where all of senior staff, central office administrators, will be held accountable. We've held principals accountable for a long time. We've not done a good job at central office taking a look at how people, whether they're in HR, budget, finance, transportation, what kind of metrics are we tracking for them? How are we holding them accountable? And then how can we begin to allocate our resources to address needs once we've identified a disparity? And we've not done a good job with that. And I feel really confident that the board and I have set a good set of expectations around that. And again, teachers, right? I mean, we talk also about evaluations for teachers. For many years, not just here in Georgia, but across the country, teachers have been evaluated in a binary way. So what does that mean? That means they're either an S for satisfactory or a U. So guess what the answer was when I asked my HR director, how many of our teachers are an S and how many are a U? And so we've got 6,000 teachers, and of course 99.9% of the teachers were an S, because that's the choice they have. They're either satisfactory or unsatisfactory. And I don't think that's fair for one group, which is the top performers. Why aren't we able to say, you're a master teacher, you're excellent, and here are the 4 or 5 objective ways that we're going to hold you accountable as a teacher, and then here's the bottom 10%. You know, any of you who've had children in school, you know there are times when you don't have great teachers in the classroom, and you complain about it, you argue about it, you advocate about it, and nothing happens. And we can't do that anymore. We want better results. We've got to be able to attract, retain, support, document, build capacity with our employees. And the only way to do that is to have a very transparent, honest way to evaluate them. So by the end of this year, all 14,000 or so of our employees will be under a new performance management system that will be able to track growth, hopefully at some point maybe even reward growth and reward excellence so that we keep our top teachers in our classrooms. When I think about some of the young teachers I meet with now who are stars, who've got undergraduates from Emory or Georgia Tech or Georgia, and they say, look, I can't afford to raise a family on a teacher's salary. I want to stay, but the only option you give me is to become a principal. And that's fine. Maybe I want to be a leader, but maybe I don't. Maybe I really want to be an AP American history teacher or a chemistry or math teacher. And we want to be able to provide opportunities, and the charter system will allow us to balance that out a little bit and think differently about the way we compensate our employees. Another sort of idea, and it's not very popular with some of our teachers, but I think it's worth floating out there and having people understand. My father's a businessman. He owns and operates restaurants. If he's got a restaurant that's not doing well, he will look in the sort of pool of chefs or managers and say, I need to bring the best manager I have because I've made a significant investment. I may need to pay this person a little bit more because the market is driving that cost up. So for example, chemistry or physics, courses that we know kids need to be able to pass in order to get through college in 4 years. I can't find teachers in chemistry and physics. If a social studies vacancy comes open, or PE, or art, 100 or 200 people apply, right? And yet both of those teachers are compensated in the same way. So when I ask businessmen and women such as yourselves, do you differentiate the way you compensate, the way you invest? The answer is yes. You pay a certain kind of engineer more than you do another. Why? Because of the skill set, the availability of those folks in the field. We don't do that. We hope to be able to continue that conversation with the board and with the community about how we might go about doing those kinds of innovative things. But it's very exciting that the state of Georgia is allowing school districts, and will be the first large urban suburban school district to take on that role in Georgia. And I'm looking forward to coming back in the future and provide you with some updates on the kinds of things that the board and the community are looking for us to stay focused on. Also, you know, one of the things that's interesting is that as we think about the charter system, it doesn't mean that all 100 of the schools will become charter schools, right? It means that the same freedoms and flexibilities that some of our charters take part in will also be provided to the school district as a whole. And one of the responsibilities that I have is to make sure that our central office is organized in a way to help support the principals, and we're going through a major reorganization right now. We've got a very 20th century sort of bureaucratic top-down management system right now, and we've got to be able to be a little more fluid in the way that we provide services to our customers from central office, which are the principals. And so I'm excited about that as well. Wanted to give a few minutes of time for any particular questions, but as we move forward, sometime in March, I'll be presenting publicly to the board and to the community a strategic plan for 5 years, and say these are the 3 or 4 things that we're going to focus on for the next 5 years, so that as businessmen and women, community members, as we go out and say, look, this is where we need help. These are the 4 or 5 areas of focus that we've identified. How might you be able to plug into our strategy? And I think a lot of times big organizations like ours, sort of walk around and pick up shiny things, which is someone says, hey, I've got this great idea. There's this reading program that's helping kids read. And so we go and we invest in this reading program, and we do very little to evaluate it and to get a sense of whether or not it's providing a good return on investment. So when you have a strong strategy, then we're able to shop those ideas and thoughts and ask you all, how can you plug in? If, for example, we find a deficit that we can't fund, whether it's with people, time, or money. So lots of exciting things happening in Fulton County Schools. Really proud of the work that's been going on here for the last decade or so. But I think there's also a great opportunity for us to set a higher bar and really be the leading school district, not only here in Georgia, but in the entire United States. I think we've got all the right raw materials. We've got a dedicated board, a dedicated board president, and Ms. Schultz, and a community that's interested in the viability of an economic environment where public schools play an important part. So I appreciate you giving me a few minutes of your time. I want to just give you a high-level view of the kinds of things that are happening in your schools and the things that we're proud of, and I think we can open it up for a few questions. Thank you.
Yeah. I have a question, and this actually goes back to No Child Left Behind, and teachers teaching to the test, and it happens, and then it's causing teachers across areas to do things they shouldn't do. And what is the status of this one-size-fits-all education program?
Very good question. The state of Georgia, again, I applaud the leadership right now at the State Department of Ed, John Barge and others who've moved forward with asking the federal government to be let free from No Child Left Behind. They've cooked up their own set of ideas to hold us accountable, where the test is only one part of sort of a metric, what they call performance indicator metric and index, and so that there's not one particular test that has so much emphasis that it causes people, as you mentioned, like in Atlanta and then recently in Daughtry County, where teachers and educators have cheated, quite frankly, to get the kind of scores that they need. And it's a question that we're not only grappling with here, but across the country, and it's a valid one. We'll find out in March or April whether or not the feds will give Georgia an opportunity to redefine what that looks like here.
A week or two ago, the Board of Education got kind of a black eye on the charter school. Maybe you could address it and give us an insight as to, it seemed like it was an easy decision, but the board went against it. And I'm sure there's a good reason.
Right, so I don't know that I have enough time to do that in 7 minutes, but I'll give you a high-level sort of rationale around what occurred, and again, a lot more than a 3-second soundbite. One of the parts that's very complicated about issues like this is that unfortunately these sorts of issues play out in the media in 5 and 10-second sound bites. And so you try to make all of this make sense, and it's difficult. So it's no one's fault. I don't blame FSA. I would hope that as a community you wouldn't blame the board or staff, but that you would just take the time and read whether the information that we've got on our website or that FSA has on their website about the process. It's a highly complicated process, but what it boiled down to at the 30,000-foot level was that the charter school had asked for a 10-year waiver. At the last minute, they changed that to 8-year. When you look at the charter process in general across the country, what you'll see is that the typical charter length is 5 years, right? But FSA in this case went and in congruence with 2 other charter schools that are linked together, borrowed, I think, around $19 million, which in our mind legally bound those 3 schools. And so we were very clear, and this is all public, this isn't anything that I haven't shared in public, but told them that we were going to offer a 3-year contract to bind all 3 of those schools, because that was the next logical place that all 3 of those schools connected, which was in 3 years. And they didn't want that. So again, I can't speak on their behalf. I'm sure that if you looked on their website, they'd have a series of logical issues and concerns around that. But it was purely legal. I applaud the work that's happened at FSA. They're one of several of our blue ribbon schools. I know they've done well academically, albeit, you know, they don't have a very challenging population. About 1% of their children are on free reduced lunch, which is what we would consider living in poverty, and about 52% of their children are considered TAG, which is talented and gifted. Not underestimating their efforts with the kids, I applaud it. But we don't make decisions solely on academic performance. We have to look at legal and financial as well. And unfortunately, in a 3-second soundbite, that sort of stuff is just really difficult to explain. I'm not sure who's got the mic.
Would this mean that FSA would lose their charter status and would lose their, I mean, would this mean the school would close at the end of this semester, at the end of the school year?
That's right. We've sent out to the community, that's again a very public comment, the school's charter will end at the end of this month, at the end of this school year, the academic year. They've got a couple of options, one of which, if you look at their front web page, they're looking at right now, which is becoming what's called a state charter. That's an option for them as well. And that's certainly one that, based on what I read, again, I haven't talked to the leaders there, is something that they might be exploring. But that's right. The decision that was made after the 120-day process, and it's typically 60 days, so again, it was very complex, but after those 120 days, the board supported my recommendation not to accept an 8 or 10-year renewal, and so we move forward.
Quick question, how are you going to integrate the core STEM standards that the state just adopted?
So there are a couple of pieces to that. When are we going to, for those of you who don't know, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. The federal government had divided, and states got to choose whether they were in a group called PARC, and this is probably getting too far in the weeds, but PARC or Smarter Balanced. There were 2 kinds of tests, quote unquote, and consortia that you could choose. But all of them had to do what's called Common Core, which is a set of sort of, people don't call it this, but it's kind of like national standards. Like, what is it that we expect every 5th grader to know and be able to do? Because what the argument was is that if you went to Mississippi, the expectation was here. If you went to Alabama, it was here. Florida, here. Massachusetts, and that wasn't a good way for us to assess whether or not our states and our local school districts were doing a good job. There's one test that is given called the NAEP. It's known sometimes as the Nation's Report Card. It's the only way that we get to find out how we're doing against other states. And unfortunately, Georgia has not done exceptionally well on the NAEP, but we're going to be following the state's lead with staff on beginning to integrate both STEM and Common Core.
I'd just like to make a comment for those of you. FSA will stay open, the middle school will stay open. It is going through a state charter application and will continue to go forward with that. We were disappointed when we offered the school district a 3-year opportunity to renew our charter. We had the backing of the Republican Party and the Republican leadership, and Linda Schultz and Dr. Avossa and the board declined that opportunity just before Christmas. FSA will still stay open. We're going for a state charter. But we're also looking for fundraising, because there's a difference between state funding and local funding that we're looking to bridge. So those of you who'd like more information about what FSA Middle School is doing, the high school, and the elementary school, please stop by. My name is Tom D. Thank you.
I just had one quick question for you. How did, after the Supreme Court ruling, that Governor Deal come up with that $10 million for the charter school system? Do you know how that?
So when it was found unconstitutional that the state was chartering the schools, when it was found unconstitutional, there was an appropriation made by the governor to both fund the school and to also allow it to continue. And there were several schools across the state of Georgia that were caught in that process. And my understanding is that's, as Mr. Deeb mentioned, is what FSA is doing.
Dr. Avossa, would you mind explaining a little further the board position and your position when that petition was resubmitted after the vote had occurred?
So again, Mr. Deeb didn't ask a question, he made a comment, but I'm happy to clarify. The school district has had a very long-standing set of practices and procedures. As you can imagine, this is a very emotional issue. When charter schools start, they open, they close, they want extensions, they don't want extensions. And we have in the past, we've never offered another sort of process to start over again. So we made our statements very clear to FSA about where we stood, why we stood there based on the actions they took in borrowing $19 million, fusing these 3 schools together. And then after the vote was made, FSA decided that they would then meet the criteria and resubmit. They've never officially resubmitted that because we don't accept resubmissions until March. And so unfortunately, they sort of took the position that they were going to place sort of their position with 8 years and hold firm on that and hope that things would change. And unfortunately, we've got a process in place. We had 2 charter schools in South Fulton that went through this exact same process. They had to wait a whole other year as well. We can't change our position year after year. We've got to have procedures and processes in place that are legally binding, that allow us to be consistent and fair, and that's the way we have to run our business. So it's a complicated piece, and again, I know that anytime there's an issue, and there will be other issues, that's what it's like when you've got a system this large, that people just take the time and understand it and have an open mind and understand that, you know, if there's a decision that needs to be made, whether it's political or not, there's always 2 sides to every story. And I would hope that people continue to understand that. So thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time today.
Doctor, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the job you're doing, and I appreciate the business-like approach you take in the school system. You're doing a great job, and I appreciate that.